parents that get into this sort of thing, that get into the paranormal, I find it humorous that I talk to these people, these fellow parents, and they don't discuss these sort of things with their children. And I actually kind of find that to be a mistake. I mean, if you're willing to talk to your kid about sex, if you're willing to talk to your children about drugs, but yet you're not willing to talk to your kids that, well, there are these possible entities, that there are apparitions. You're not willing to talk to your kids. You're willing to dismiss it almost as fairy tale. But then when they get older, like 19 or 20 or whatnot, then you can finally go ahead and break. I think that's just a poor parenting excuse.
But I think the majority of people still to this day do not believe in spirits, do not believe in demons. Truly, they say they do. They're taught it in their religion, but they don't truly believe in it. So it's not something that they would bring up to their kids.
But see, I think that's actually a goofy, aspect of it all. Is that in my travels, in my studies, I mean, obviously I've got a little bit more insight than some people in the aspect of demonology. Do these entities exist? Yes, they do. Now, granted, I could say that's on blue in the face, but obviously, people take it always from their religion. They're not willing to see it from everybody else's platform. If you're willing to go ahead and just accept it even from your platform, and ironically, I think that maybe this is one of the best things, is I actually talked to a lady who sat there and told her son that the father, because he had served in Iraq and he unfortunately passed away, sat there and said, your father is up there serving in God's army. He's one of the fighting angels now. And I thought it was very beautiful, and it really is. But their house ended up experiencing some activity, and she was always dismissing it. Now, her son is granted only 8 years old, but she was dismissing it on behalf of him, in front of him. But yet, behind her child's back, she was paranoid. And she was scared because there was a lot of activity inside her home that just kind of made you go, wait a minute. And the part that got me was why aren't you acknowledging this to your child? I understand children can sometimes get scared, but it's very much like this. Inside my house, I've got 4 what I call, go broke boxes. And these boxes contain elements for performing exorcism, elements for ridding a home of whatever negative. And I've got 2, one in each automobile. I've got one on the downstairs, one on the upstairs. And my daughter's only 9 years old, and yet I guarantee she probably named every device inside the boxes, and more importantly, how to properly use them better than I could. I don't think people who get involved in the paranormal especially should try to hide that from their children. Be honest, be fair. Children are brilliant. Once again, they're human beings, and they're brilliant. And to make matters even more interesting about it, is that always look at it, if you have to, look at it this way. Like I said, my daughter's 9. She's starting calculus in school. And 4th grade, calculus.
Yeah.
And, yeah, well...
What happened to adding and dividing and times?
Yeah. I know.
Guess we skipped
that. I did not experience any of that until college.
Yeah.
The reality is that children are being taught in school more ideology, more ways of thinking than we were in our history, in our time. And if we're raising children to go ahead and become early adults, then at least on some levels, like I said, if you're willing to talk to them, give them the sex talk, the birds and the bees, if you're willing to give them the drug talk, like drugs are bad, well, then maybe it's time to go ahead and step it up to a little bit and actually acknowledge certain things. Like, no, you do not want to play with a Ouija board or a spirit board, depending on your terminology. The reason is, this is the negative stuff that can happen. And there are, of course, is always a big debate with the Ouija board or a spirit board, to which people sit there and say, oh, well, it's just a way for a human to channel their subconscious. And then there are people that sat there and always take the approach like, no, once you're doing anything that is communication with a spirit, it doesn't matter how lack of technology it is, because people do perform EVP sessions in their homes. It doesn't matter what way you're trying to communicate with the spirit. If there's a chance, an inkling of a possibility for them to make that contact, they'll do so. So the best thing to do is stop and try to explain things to them. And remember, your kid is nothing more but you, just, younger. The knowledge that you have, if you can instill that in them, it gives them a chance that when they get older, hopefully, it's basically you, but they've grown. They're able to come up with better ideas and better concepts. And as far as the paranormal is concerned, it's family first in my house.
So you talk about you have a box of things that you could use to protect your house, protect your family, take on an investigation, protect from dark entities. What about people who don't have religious beliefs? I mean, isn't it part of it that you have to believe in these things? Like you talk about talisman. I read the beginning of your book a bit, and you talk about talisman. It's a metal coin with something on it. Why would that work?
Well, because when you use talismans, if you go with the concept, talismans have two properties to them. One, obviously, it is the symbol of a spirit, an entity. It could be an angelic or demonic. Look at it this way. In some aspects, it's kind of like a calling card or a business card, if you will. And if you use talismans, if you use certain rituals, and ironically even early Christian rituals, and use these talismans the proper way, you are trying to bring more positive energy, more positive spirits to a dark situation. Some can be used for that of protection, some can be used for that of fighting. And I think one of the biggest things people have a misconception whenever they hear the word demonic is they automatically put in their head some being that looks like a gargoyle. And for those who actually know architecture, obviously gargoyles were not actually meant to be evil. They were actually meant as protectors back in the early Gothic architecture and whatnot. But the reality is demons take many shapes, many forms. And the one thing that is common through every version of a demon, and it doesn't matter if the demon is something as trivial as Lilith or as folkloric as Chernobog, a demon is nothing more but a bully. And if you don't look at those bullies head on, you don't fight them at their level, and you don't use whatever means possible to protect yourself, your family, or in some cases, if you're a demonologist that shows up at paranormal investigations, if you aren't there to protect yourself, and of course the paranormal team, and more importantly the client, then what good are you doing? Like I said, not every house that's haunted is haunted by a demon, but at times that you get in those situations, it's a put up or shut up situation. You've got to be willing to fight somehow. And now I always say that, but at the same time, I want people to remember that. Take a look at me. I'm wearing one of my regular shirts. I wear bowling shirts. I'm a fat guy in Ohio. I do not look like Van Helsing. I do not talk like Van Helsing. I am not going to show up at your house with a bag of holy water and a thing of steaks. I very much believe that while you're going to these homes, and there's a lot of demonologists that they really get the strong religious concepts behind being a demonologist. and the problem is that those are the first to either try to trick people on a deliverance ministry or even worse, fumble things up, because I'll go into that. The reality is that we should show up and never perform an exorcism. All right. Now I have got the Book of Roman Rituals. I know how, and I've seen enough exorcisms performed. I know how to perform them, but I'm not a priest. I'm not even a preacher. Now, I am a minister through the New Life Church, but I am a card-carrying member, yes. But the reality is that no, I should not do that, because when a demonologist shows up, we should show up, ascertain the situation, identify any entity that is there, and then start setting up the defenses. And when I say set up the defenses, literally try to protect myself, the paranormal team, and the clients, and notify the proper clergy. One of the most interesting ones that had always gotten me, and I still laugh about it, was there was a family that was being altercated in a situation. They were very, very, very Catholic, and every time, and that's the key part I have to say, is every time they were having these problems, we were notifying a priest, and it happened twice. We'd call a priest in, did the house cleansing, and it actually felt positive. And I always do a 30-day follow-up. Well, I ended up getting called 2 weeks after, and their problem was bad. It was back, and it was almost as severe, if not even worse, than it was before. Show up, notified the same priest, went through the procedures once again. 2 weeks later, now third time, I'm getting called again. Show up. Now, I'd already identified the entity in question. It was an Egyptian demon.
Now,
So,
how do you know it was an Egyptian demon? How do you determine that?
Well, actually, like I said, that's the reason why you keep certain religious artifacts. If they're positive in nature, these creatures will be attracted to them, or it's almost like an attraction of disgust. The best way of explaining it is if you take 25 religions and have artifacts from each and every one, the one that gets attacked the most, chances are that's going to be your demon. That's going to be the pantheon that your demon was born out of, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, it does now, yeah.
Okay, well, I had identified it as Egyptian demonic base, and sat there, and I just ended up, I had said it 2 times prior, but like I said, very stout Catholic family. I sat there and I said, look, third time out, come on, give me a chance. We'll call your priest back in to do a formal blessing, but can I at least call someone, a contact, and try to get them here? Ended up calling a lady who was very, pretty much a high priestess in Balmaic magic. She performed a proper cleansing ritual under those beliefs, and the house felt lighter. And come to find out, the priest hadn't been notified for about a month after it was all over. And it was almost like when I called him, it was almost like, oh yeah, I almost forgot to do that. And they ended up having the priest come in, but everything was normal. But the benefit is that, like I said, from the time the Balmaic high priestess had done the cleansing ritual for 30 days, there was no activity. And even when at the time I called, there was still no activity. It was just a basic follow-up.
So why would this demon then, that was not of a Catholic, I don't know, why would this demon be bothering these people when you stated that their religion and what they focus on is what causes the demons to come around? Or did I misunderstand you?
No, actually, that's very valid. The reality is that demons are just creeps. Like I said before, they're bullies.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what religion a person is. Like I said, there's 2 reasons why a demon is attracted to you. One is what I call the rat in a cage feeder bar method.
Okay.
And the second is just what I call the stovetop from hell. You know the expression, put things on the back burner?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Well, imagine a way a demon thinks is it's very much a stovetop. You've got the front burner, but then imagine a back burner with probably millions of back burners. And the demon is constantly reaching up there, grabbing one off the back burner, stirring the pot a little bit, putting it back, grabbing another one, stirring the pot. That's the reason why we actually know there were cases. One took place in Brisbane, Australia, took place in not far from, I want to say New Orleans, Louisiana, and another one up by Seattle. There was actually the same demonic entity identified in all three areas over the course of 1 hour, because it's the way these creatures think. Just because you rid them in one area doesn't mean they don't, pop right up in another area. It's like, no. I remember this pot. I love to stir this pot, and let's go to the next. You can't. A lot of people like to sit there and automatically assume that the protection that they wield is the strongest one. And like I said, I'm not here to knock on religions. And if anything, I don't want anyone to stop and say, well, I have to change my faith because this guy is saying so. But one thing I want people to understand is that there are more versions of what you believe out there. And the more you understand those and how they interact, how they work with to support your faith, the better off you are. I jokingly call the modern atheist movement the new religion, because there are, I look at it this way, if they're willing to put billboards up and preach their beliefs to other people, congratulations, you've just formed a religion. And the biggest thing about it is that there are, and I've actually encountered too many of these cases where you take devout atheists and they end up getting something inside their home that is not normal, it is paranormal. And in some cases, it's not all, in some of the cases it actually has been only an entity that you can describe as demonic. And when they see you actually going through the religion basis and it works, it solves that problem for them. I've ended up making contact with a few atheists that end up saying, I think I'm starting to understand things, and all of a sudden you hear about people end up becoming like a deacon at a church or something. And like I said, it's been an interesting 20 years of seeing people kind of get their eyes open. Just because you've got your eyes, my personal favorite, like I said with atheists, is just because you say you've got your eyes open, the reality is, no, you don't. You've got your eyes closed because you're following a simple scientific train of thought, and you're ignoring everything else on the side. And it's much and not to single them out, it's very much like anybody else on another religious version. You've got your eyes focused on one thing, so everything else doesn't exist. And I think what truly actually does help people out of any religious faith, any belief, any spirituality, is when you melt these walls that separate your religion from the rest and start realizing, no, we're all on this planet, we're all human beings, and it doesn't matter what God you worship, because you can pick a god or a goddess, and they're nothing more but pure love. As long as you can do that, then that is the benefit, and that's the reason why you will be able to survive any dangerous situation that involves these entities. Is you've got to be willing to just focus on yourself and focus on everything else around you. And like I said, don't be narrow-minded. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people say, well, you shouldn't trip over your open mind. Well, that's true. Because as much as there are people that try to do serious work in these fields, in these paranormal fields, there are charlatans out there. There are hoaxers, unfortunately. And the most you can do is, like I said, it's much like anything else in life. You got to focus on the positive and ignore that negative.
Okay, now let me ask you, can a demon Can a demon attack somebody? Can they like attack their head and the back of their neck? Can they do things to a human being?
Actually, here I'm going to bring this up. You'll have to forgive me. I'm only going by what you're thinking. I don't know if you can see. Oh, no, that's not paranormal with the light going out. That's just my battery sucks. I've actually got a scar, like right here. Oh, there. I don't know if you can see it.
No.
No, it's hard to see. No, it just looks like a white forehead.
All right. Well, I've actually got a scar right there.
We'll believe you.
Okay. It's about an inch long, and that is courtesy of a giant glass ashtray that picked itself off of it looked like an end table on the other side of the room, and decided to basically fly itself at what felt like 100 miles an hour toward my face, and obviously it made contact. The reality is that can a demon actually harm you? No. If you go through proper protection, no, they cannot harm you whatsoever. But are demons permitted to bend the rules, or in some cases break the rules? Yes, they are. And that means if you're sitting there and you bask yourself in protection, and I'm not trying to scare people, but I got to be a realist about this. You can bask yourself in as much white light as you want, but it's not going to stop an entity from behind the door as you walk by it to swing that door open and crack you in the nose. It's a lot of the interaction with demons on a violent method is actually done because you didn't protect. You might have protected yourself, but you didn't protect everything else, and everything else is kind of at will.
Now, I have a question from the producer of the show.
Sure.
Whoops. It's Lori, and she said, I read years ago from the Warrens in 1974, actually, that anything over 5 pounds was not human when things get thrown around. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I think I remember the quote. You're speaking of something that weighs more than 5 pounds. If it's thrown, it's definitely not human. Was that the quote?
That anything over 5 pounds was not human.
Right, you had it
when
right.
things got thrown.
Yeah,
Yeah. Whoops.
that was it.
In all fairness, that quote is probably closer to like 4.78. I think I don't get me wrong, Ed. The man I can't say is because unfortunately he passed away. The man was probably the groundbreaking master of what being a demonologist is. And I give him credit, even though he broke the one rule himself, because he did perform exorcism. It's actually probably metaphysically it's probably around 4.7 pounds, but what the reality is that these objects, when they get thrown at you, they can be as small as a marble and weigh obviously less than an ounce. There is no true definition as to what they're able to achieve, because you got to remember, if you sit there and you say, okay, well, there's a doorstop, and the doorstop weighs that magical number of 4.7 pounds, and it happens to get pushed in such a way that it's able to shoot a marble in your direction or a stone in your direction, then congratulations. Like I said, you found the way around it. The best thing to do is invest in body armor. If you're going to do this, it's like, seriously, I mean, I'm saying this as an actual word of advice. If you're going to go in someone's home and you've got reports of demonic activity, you've got to confirm that there's actual demonic activity. They sell SWAT gear, and there's a reason why cops wear it. I do apologize. I wish I'll have to take a photograph sometime and actually put that up on my website showing my battle scar. But I assure you, a large brown clear glass ashtray getting, flung across the room, that's enough to make you realize, well, these little bastards can pretty much do just damn near anything.
Okay, now I have another question from Joey, one of our viewers, and he said, how do you know that, I guess the ashtray, how do you know it was a demon and not a malevolent spirit?
Because the house had already been checked down. We knew that we were actually, like I said, it's much in the aspect of placing the boxes, which artifact gets the most activity. Once you've identified a demon inside the home, and it's not just a malevolent, negative, former human being spirit, then yeah, I can honestly say that, my little battle scar is actually, it was from a demon. I still am wondering why it did what it did, but it's been years, and I think just the reality of it is that no, they're just, like I said, they're bullies, and you got to be willing to stand up to bullies.
Okay, so Lori again is asking, she says, I mean anything over 4.7 to 5 pounds, is that human or demonic?
Well, like I said, if you go by Ed Warren's definition, anything over 4.7 pounds should mean that it is a demonic in nature. But unfortunately, when Ed made that quote, and I think he ended up retracting it slightly. That's the reason why I believe 4.7 was actually put in place, possibly. Ed himself, much like myself, much like any other demonologist, every day we're learning something new. And I do believe that at the time that quote was 4.7 pounds. That meant that, that's how you can scientifically tell that that's demonic and not just a former human being. There have been a lot of debates on these subjects. I think one of the most impressive concepts that's come around is people trying to say, well, poltergeist activity doesn't mean that there's a malevolent spirit. Poltergeist activity can mean psychokinesis activity. And the reality about that is that the psychokinesis and malevolent spirit, it doesn't matter. Poltergeist activity should be just related as poltergeist activity. And I think in the aspects of demonology, you either got a demon or you don't. If it's demonic, it's going to identify itself. And I actually want to say it was as late as the year, I might be pushing it, it might be as late as the year roughly 2000 that Ed had written some literature showing that it basically boiled down to it didn't matter what objects got moved. If you've already identified your demonic entity inside a home or inside a dwelling or inside a structure, then you obviously know that it doesn't matter how heavy or how light. The one quote out of 1974, it was really at the earlier times of the modern demonologist movement. And this is back before you actually had a lot of the modern deliverance ministries. One of the biggest things you have to remember about demonology is that it had undergone a structure change. Unfortunately, you had people such as Mike Warnke with his book, The Satan Seller, and so forth, in which he ended up developing a ministry, which turned out, his whole little Satan Seller thing, it was turned out to be completely false. It was even exposed by a Christian publication, the Cornerstone magazine. When you sit there and you look at this era, this satanic panic, a lot of people were misled. A lot of people were given ideas and concepts, and they tried to make sense of it. And Ed, of course, Ed was trying to make sense of this during this time. And let's face facts. No other human being, at least recorded and acknowledged, had actually seriously tried to do demonology on a scientific level. That's the key part about this, is that no one else has really done that. So, £5, I mean, it was a great idea. It made a lot of sense. I mean, I think anybody can sit there and think about, well, you know, I constantly have a pencil that's rolling across the table, and I believe that's a ghost. And then another person says, well, I have this 20-pound weight that's over 5 pounds, and it's getting thrown across the room. Well, that's got to be a demon. And you stop and you go back to earlier thinking, well, of course, that makes more sense. A regular spirit couldn't do that. But, you know, it just depends on the malevolency, if you will, of the spirit. Or, more importantly, just what the demon, if it is a demon, is actually up to, and what it wants to achieve.
I have another question from a viewer. Now, this viewer has come in late. I think you've already covered this, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. She's asking this. It's Spectro Seeker. They said, has Kurt ever worked with the church or with a client for documentation purposes to refer to the church for exorcism?
As far as actual exorcisms, I have actually worked with some churches, and I have actually worked with some non-churches as well. I guess I can honestly say I've covered both ends of the spectrum, or many. The biggest thing about it is that documentation, that is entirely up to the church. I myself actually have a questionnaire that is given to a client, and they have 3 choices on this questionnaire. The first choice is basically, to break it down, basically says, I, Kurt W. Kesler, K.W. Kesler, have full right to tell your story to the planet. The second one is that I'm permitted to talk about the story. However, though, I'm not permitted to acknowledge your name or where exactly you live to basically expose you. And the third one is I have no right in any way, shape, or form to ever discuss your case and history to anyone. And I know a lot of churches, certain people, especially the deliverance ministries, unfortunately, they always want the client to take that first box. The one where it says, yeah, tell me about tell my story to everyone on the planet. And the downfall with that is that, yeah, and I'm probably going to give this away. Obviously, that sets up a lot of people. It sets them up in respects that you kind of actually know what they're there for. These are the people that they're requiring some attention, you know. And it's actually kind of sad because in those cases, I'm probably going out on a limb. I'm probably going to upset some people. But 9 times out of 10, whenever people like that, or heaven forbid, even a church group wants people to take that first one, that's usually when, like I said, it's a case of people just wanting attention, or even worse, people possibly requiring some mental help. And it's only because the other two that you know that there's a seriousness with it. That usually gives you the opportunity to retract on that. Ironically, I've got contacts in certain paranormal groups, and they, one I was just recently told, they call them the Nevermind file. Myself involved with certain, if you will, ring of demonologists, a group of people that we stay in strict contact with each other. I call them pancake flippers, and a few others refer to them as pancake flippers, because what happens is it's like they're coming up to your griddle, they're pouring, they're showing you the pancake batter, like, hey, take a look. They pour some on the griddle, and the second you flipped it, basically you tell them, like, look, I'm not seeing any serious evidence whatsoever. I'm not seeing anything that I can actually acknowledge on a public spread. That's usually, you know, like I said, you flip the pancake, that's usually when they want their pancake and they go back to their table and they sit there and wait for somebody else to give them a moment of celebrity. And unfortunately, like I said, there are church entities, there are church groups that very much operate that same way, because if they can show that someone is possessed, and if they can show that their preacher or priest has performed a successful exorcism, well, it works out very much that way. It works out that they do what they can to get a name for himself. You know, I actually got picked on because I kept myself quiet. I like I said, I did not sit there. I did not acknowledge to people. I was even picked on by close friends who knew I was always interested in things spooky and paranormal, but never knew how serious I took it. And then when I sat there and I basically said, well, I've collected enough information, I'm going to publish a book, and I put the book out. I did. I actually got a lot of people sitting there saying, whoa, wait a minute, where'd this come? This hit us out of left field. And the reality is that I'm not really looking for fame here. I just felt I had enough good information. I want to make sure that people had that opportunity to collect it. The biggest thing about it is if I can take part of that concept that I told you earlier about people trying to gain celebrity through these methods. One of the most ridiculous things that does take place in any paranormal research, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the demonic, the occult, or just plain old, just flat out old-fashioned hauntings, is there are so many businesses out there that when you show yourself as a demonologist or paranormal investigator, they want you to show up. They want you to come to their business and proclaim it haunted. Why? Because the business is failing and they could use the extra income. Or the business is doing okay and they still want the extra income. I was actually involved in the case of a bed and breakfast that had spread stories for years that it was haunted. And I must have probably spent, really in reality, over the course of a year, almost a month there. I mean, we're talking weekends, and in one case it was 2 weeks straight. And I did not record any activity whatsoever, but I always heard a great story. And like I said, it's those stories that get spread. And easy, another thing too, especially if you're a paranormal investigator, you will find these people to get a little bit almost upset when you say your place is not haunted whatsoever. They get upset with you because they know at that point that if you acknowledge to everyone that the place is haunted, then, well, there goes all their extra money.
But the thing about when paranormal groups go out to a location, that you're not always going to get something that first night that you do the investigation. It should be an ongoing thing.
You're absolutely right. The trick is that when people always say that, especially at these bed and breakfasts, and they happen to have a bar area or a hotel, they happen to have a bar, they're always talking about all the activity getting set up in their bar room and so forth. And like I said, when you set up information or you set up things, and if a lot of people, I don't know if they've actually seen them, but deer stalkers use them. The cameras that you can use, digital cameras that you can use.
Yeah.
You set those up inside a bar. You get the permission from an owner to set this up at a bar, and it only you have it timed and set up to where it only turns itself on at midnight and shuts itself off at 7 a.m. You leave it there for, like I said, up to a month, and then you come back and you keep grabbing the data, and you don't see anything being moved. You don't see anything paranormal. Well, I kind of hate to tell people that, well, you don't have any actual paranormal activity. You've just got some really good ghost stories that, of course, spread like wildfire because word of mouth is is the biggest advertiser. And unfortunately, it does. It gets people upset. Another thing that gets people upset is, and I know that there's a lot of people that swear by it, is orb photograph or orb photography.
Yeah.
You can always debunk an orb very simply by looking at the photograph and verifying that the flash was turned on the camera. If there is no flash, or you're using an infrared night camera and the infrared light happens to be turned off, if you happen to gain an orb that way, then yes, you truly have an orb. If not, you've got to be critical about that situation, and you've got to be willing to say it's nothing more but dust being reflected off by the light, or even an insect in the case of infrared night photography. too many people are willing, and I think that's part of the reason why the whole demonic movement has charged into wildfire concerning these paranormal shows, is because people automatically assume they automatically assume the paranormal, or even worse, they assume the extreme darkness of the paranormal. People take an orb photograph, which is nothing more but dust because it's reflected off the flash, and then I'm going to say, see, I got orbs. And the problem with that is that you've added to the problem. You need to be scientific when you're debunking these sort of things. And I don't mean debunk them in a bad way. I mean debunk them in a good way. If you can honestly say, look, I set this camera out and I took photographs inside the room. There is no flash because you don't see the reflection on anything in the room. But yet I've got this blue dot in the middle of the frame, or I've got a red dot over here, or a white dot right here. Congratulations, you just truthfully captured an orb. There was a bordello out in, I want to say it was Montana, and the name does escape me, sorry, people look it up, have fun. It was a formal bordello, and back in the 70s, this guy had bought it, and he was refurbishing it. Well, people went in there and they were taking Polaroid photographs. And I actually blame him, the owner of it, for a lot of the orb movement now. They're kicking up a lot of dust because of the refurbishing, and these people are taking just Polaroid photographs instant. And they're like, what are these things in front of the camera? Well, because he thought the same way that a lot of the other business owners that try to say a place is haunted. He said, oh, those must be spirits. Those are orbs. And they were nothing more than dust. If people don't believe that the dust orb photography is a true value, I strongly recommend they take their camera, they go to a couch, they pound the armrest of the couch, then take a photograph staring off in the room with the flash on and see how many of these orbs they've actually captured. The reality is that, no, you've got to be harsh and critical on your own information, your own evidence that you put out there, because if you don't do that, then you're just as worthless as the guy who owns the business that's trying to get it proclaimed haunted. The reality is that you're not adding anything positive to the pool, the pool of paranormal research, if you will. That is absolutely one of the most harshest things. And I truly want people to realize that, no, there was a time in paranormal research before the use of night vision where you had to leave the lights on. A lot of people try to say, oh, well, night vision photography is the best way to gain spiritual activity inside a home. No, it's not. Like I said, I started out using a VHS camera. I remember when I got very excited because I got to use a VHS camera that had cat's eye, which just meant that we could turn the lights down a little bit, because if people use night vision, excuse me, the problem with that is that you're not able to verify 9 times out of 10 in your shots that there is someone in a dark outfit moving stuff around. You know, you've got to make it to where your information, your evidence that you put out there to others is 100% legitimate, and that the more critical you are about your own evidence that you expose to people, the more that people have to actually take that evidence at face value. If you are in a home that is experiencing paranormal activity and you set up a video camera and you set it up with the lights on, and all of a sudden you see a chair move, and you can verify that there's no strings attached because, well, you're not using night vision, and the chair itself hops up and moves around, and stuff gets knocked off the table and you don't see any strings, congratulations, you just took it one step further as far as actually presenting legitimate proof to others that there is something out there. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a fallen human or not. You just gave critical proof. And it's on that way of thinking that's how we have to react, and that's how we should react. I think one of the most unfortunates are people that they're paranormal researchers, and of course they put these old photographs up on Facebook, and they get 2,000 comments. And the problem is that there is a lot more people that have stopped and realized, well, dust is dust. There are a lot of people out there that try to say that, no, I saw a face in it. And the problem is that there's actually a human disease concerning that. Hang on here. Forgive me here. Talk amongst yourselves.
All right. No, I want to ask you, I just want to go over something, because we do have some paranormal investigators that are watching the show. So I just want to go over it again. So if a paranormal group goes in, they're called into a private residence, and the family believes that they have demonic presence in the house. How do they determine? How would they determine the difference between a bad spirit and a demon?
Well, the best thing to do is actually notify a demonologist.
And what makes a good demonologist?
Me, of course.
Well, you're in Ohio.
Actually,
You have the look, though. You do have the look.
Well, no, the reality is that there's a reason why I spent the time researching and studying and doing the things I did, because I wanted to understand this. And I understand that I am in Ohio. However, there are very credible demonologists out there all over the country. Down in Texas, you've got Daryl Martell, who is a very credible demonologist who cuts through a lot of the bunk and a lot of the insanity to get to the source root.
So for each, you could put up a whole list of names for people who don't know demonologists, who don't know you, who don't know these names. What do they want to look for when they're researching for a demonologist?
Someone who, I think, for the better degree, is willing to say, let's verify that we've got something paranormal. I won't lie, I was a lot younger, and I was a little bit more just uber excited, if you will, and thankfully it was back when gasoline only cost 99 cents a gallon, and with a full tank of gas, drove myself all the way out to the great state of Missouri, and showed up because I had gotten called and went upstairs, and then all of a sudden realized, after being upstairs and hearing these noises, that the team in question hadn't thoroughly researched the property and found out it was nothing more but a squirrel, or actually I think it was a raccoon up in the attic. Obviously, I'm willing to drive. I'm willing to go anywhere. To find a good demonologist, there's two ways you can do it. You can either look on the web and look around and just honestly ask yourself, does this person seem a little bit more credible, or does this person seem like they want to come inside my home, find everything out, and then write a book about it and make it a tell-all to where, whatever. It's those right there, especially ones that are trying to support a ministry through their views. You've got to watch it with those, because these people, if they introduce you to a lot of other people that sit there and say, well, I'm a demonologist and I've helped this person, this person, this person, and you can tell after 2 minutes of talking to these people that their ideas of religion are a little bit narrow-minded, chances are you may have found a person you may not want to actually call and rid yourself of this problem. You've got to keep an open mind, but more importantly, you've got to be willing to be critical of a person. I have a friend, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And I do call him a friend, even though I don't support all his views. And he's actually a demonologist down in the great state of Arkansas. And his webpage is filled with nothing but orb photographs and ectoplasma photographs and so forth. And the reality is that, no, I can tell that the ectoplasma was nothing more but someone's cigarette smoke, because I asked to see the whole line of photographs, and there's a shot that was taken in succession of a person before this photograph from one angle of the room to another angle of the room, where a person's holding a cigarette, and then the camera turns. You got the ectoplasma, and then it comes back over here, and there's no ectoplasma, and there's a guy still holding the cigarette. So, but yet, like I said, if you're not willing, if the demonologist or even paranormal researcher is not willing to debunk their own evidence and basically brush things off and use the application, if you will, of Occam's razor. Once you slice things down to the bare core, that's chances are what you truly have. If they're not willing to do that, then I personally, my own opinion, I run the other way. I can't. I don't want to say that, well, people out there are, not educated on the fact, because, I mean, let's face facts. It's a rare job, if you will, to be a demonologist. But the reality is that if you aren't willing to go ahead and truly produce evidence, I mean actual evidence, then you haven't done anything. You've actually kind of made a mockery not only of your own belief. If you are running a deliverance ministry, look at it this way: if you're not willing to debunk your own evidence, you've made a mockery of your own religion. And in some aspects, I kind of look at it this way: if a person's willing to make a mockery of their own religion, I wouldn't want that person to be involved in my case.
And I think,
they don't respect for themselves.
I think too, from a case that Norene and I were actually on, there was somebody who was called in for this gentleman, and he charged a fee, and he came in and claimed to have blocked all these portals and all these openings where these things were coming through. And because of what I do, I walked in and just said, well, you just ticked them off. And basically he made things worse by what he did and not knowing what he did. And I think that's another thing people need to be aware of, is somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, who truly doesn't know what they're doing, but says that they do, can make things worse, can really rile up whatever is there.
You actually brought up something that I think is probably a very good standpoint, is I do not charge a fee. And there's a very good amount of very highly respectable demonologists and, more importantly, paranormal investigators. They don't charge fees. If a person has done this, has taken this route in their life, this is the way they want to go, then that means that they are backing that up. And I think in respect of the story you were telling me, where a person sat there and said, well, here, pay me my fee, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to go ahead and rid this place of the demons and the portals and whatnot. No, you just rid yourself of some money. That's basically, what took place. The reality is I don't charge a fee. And like I said, there's plenty of other people in this field who do not charge fees, because it's just the way it goes. Now, don't get me wrong. I like I said, I don't mind flying, but if I know I'm going to a case, a situation in which there's possible demonic activity, I have a tendency to drive. The only reason is because I guess, even though I know demons take many different forms, I do know that there's entities that love to fly, and I trust myself at the wheel and whatever. And I have accepted gas donations. I was once greeted in the great state of Utah with $200 in gas cards, and I was floored. I was excited about that. But the reality is a good demonologist, a good paranormal investigator, there's no such thing as a fee. We're there for the understanding, the gaining of knowledge is why we're there. And yes, I've spent many crap nights in the backseat of my car trying to sleep, so yeah.
Kurt, before we end the show, I just want to plug your book. And so would you tell them the name of your book, the name of your website?
Where people can contact you?
Yeah, actually, you can contact me through my website. The name of the website is demon101.com. You can purchase the book there, Demonology 101. Soon to have Demonology 201 and Demonology 301. Hopefully within the next year, the remainder of them will be out. You can purchase the books there or through Barnes & Noble at their stores. Soon, I believe it's like 2 more weeks and everything should be worked out there. But I guess that's about that.
And it's Kindle friendly, everybody.
Yes, actually, yes. I do have digital copies available.
Yay.
Though, in respects to paranormal researchers, it's only because I've already received some feedback from that. If you go into a haunting situation, obviously, batteries like to get drained. I've already been told by people, yes, they bought the Kindle or the Nook version, and at the same time, they still ended up buying a paper copy. So you may want to consider the paper copy just on basis of that.
And Kurt is also on Facebook. A lot of our friends, viewers are on Facebook, and Kurt is also on Facebook if you want to friend him. And Kurt has been on numerous TV and radio shows. He was on Coast to Coast with George Noory.
Fantastic.
He was on the Paranormal TV Network Psychic Gift program. And you will also be seeing him on the History Channel and A&E. He was interviewed for various documentaries. They will integrate his interview into any of the programs that is related to his subjects.
Yeah, and that actually took me by surprise. It was actually because like I said, I've never approached the media version of this business. That was interesting to see how everything going. Right now, I have this background, which is nothing but plain stuff. You always see the experts. I found this out. They call you into a little studio, and you sit there and you look at the bookshelf. All the books are fake. I thought that was funny. They're all fake. They're just wood books. I promise you.
Kurt, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to meet you. It was a great interview, and we wish you all the best.
Well, thank you. It was very, very, very nice, and I thank you both for having me on.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Oh, well, yay, what an interview.
Yeah.
My goodness, I hope you all learned something new, new way of thinking about demons and occult, and we could have had a whole nother show with many things.
Yes, because we didn't even get into it. He also is an occult researcher, and we didn't even get into that.
We'll have to look about that later down the road.
Oh, yeah, that'll be another show.
Yay.
So if you want to contact Kurt for any information, he is on Facebook. It's Kurt W. Kesler, and he also has Demon 101. So if you need any of his help, I'm sure he can help you.
From what I've read of his book, the little bit I've read, it's very interesting, and I think it's definitely something that we all could enlighten ourselves about.
So,
yay!
Another great show.
It went by, didn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate you being here with us on Tuesday evenings,
We do.
and we will be back same time next Tuesday for another great show.
Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Good night.